people are either vocally against the regime and actively participate in anti-regime protests, or believe that the regime is completely corrupt and believe it to be illegitimate. But
the counter argument there is, how can they be doing so much propaganda when they're already like kind of muted? You know what I mean? Like how is that possible that their propaganda, which they definitely have, to be clear, you know, could be nearly as loud as our propaganda in America? Let's even just put it on our foot here.
Because they don't aspire to do anything else but propaganda. So, you know, I have said this to many different audiences. The difference between the Iranian regime and, say, the US government, when you compare the two and say, how come Iran, you know, with so much stress on it, with so much pressure and so many limitations, is succeeding by leaps and bounds, even as compared to the United States, in the propaganda war, in winning hearts and minds across the globe? And the answer is, A, they have completely lost their own internal domestic population, that aside from their own very limited constituency that's on the payroll of the regime, the vast majority of Iranians wish that they wake up in the morning and this regime has fallen or is gone. But they win the global war of propaganda because they're not doing anything else. They're not trying to solve the environmental crisis. They're not trying to figure out how to advance the cause of education in Iran. They're not trying to, you know, build new universities, or they have no other ambition other than prolonging their own existence. And when you're so focused on just one or a couple of goals, and you forego everything else, well, you do those couple of things a lot better than any other government system that has to tend to millions of people and address, you know, a whole range of other demands. And Iranians aren't. They're not trying to, you know, win hearts and minds within the country. Just as you and I are speaking, the truckers in Iran are going on their 6th day of national strikes. We know women, as we saw in 2022, came to the streets, you know, took their, you know, Islamic dress code off. Men joined them. So we know women have been, which is, you know, nearly 50% of the nation, have been against the regime, have been against the harsh rules of the regime. And when I say women, I include women who are believers, women who dress in the Islamic dress code. They say that we don't want to see it imposed on others because good religion, you know, good Islam, it doesn't come by force. And so if Islam is going to have a future in Iran, it needs to be embraced, not put on, not imposed.
How have they not overthrown the regime then? If so many people, if it's like the way you're making it sound is like it's unanimous. I mean, my friend David Satter, who's covered Russia since 1976, always talks about 15% of the population took down the Soviet Union. You don't even need 50. Like 15 will do.
Right.
So why hasn't that happened? I mean, there was a moment in 2022 where all these protests were happening. It's like, I thought to myself, all right, maybe finally we're here. But I was thinking maybe that means 30% of the country's come around.
Right.
You know, 20% of the country. But you're making it sound like it's damn near 100.
I'm not making it sound like. You can look at, you know, all sorts of polls and data that various groups have done in Iran anonymously. And people are either vocally against the regime and actively participate in anti-regime protests, or believe that the regime is completely corrupt and believe it to be illegitimate, but can't figure out or are too fearful to rise up against it. So I think the problem with Iran has been the problem in some ways comparable with Venezuela. Right? Is there anyone who doubts that the last elections in Venezuela
they were rigged.
went to the opposition, right?
Yeah.
They have been rigged in Iran time and time again.
Yeah.
We know in 2009 when the Green Revolution came, when millions of people took to the streets in Iran and raised signs saying, "Where's my vote?" That election had been rigged, or the Venezuelan elections was rigged. And we know, for instance, in Russia, the elections are rigged all the time.
Yes.
The problem is that we are facing an era of solidarity between authoritarian regimes. North Korea, China, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, among several others, but these are the five. There are people who refer to them as the axis of misery, who prop each other up. Why should North Korean soldiers be fighting against Ukraine in Russia's war? Why should Vladimir Putin send troops or summon its air power to put out the Syrian revolution?
Right.
When it broke out, these regimes have been holding each other up, and the solidarity that Russia has shown and China has shown with Iran in trying to salvage its economy, in trying to prop up, all of Iran's air defense systems is given to Iran by Russia.
Right.
So as long as you have world tyrannical superpowers that are keeping you alive, populations that are peaceful and nonviolent can't have a prayer against you because you're just too powerful. And I think to that end, I think what has also been incredibly damaging is that every time Iran has come to the brink, and it just perhaps needed a little bit of support from the United States or Western governments in order to really weaken the regimes so the population can finish the job, the US and Europe have withdrawn and have refused to, allow Iranians or help Iranians to go the last mile.
This is where I think it gets really weird, because I, for one, would love to see the regime in Iran toppled. I mean,
any conscientious human being should.
It's a common sense issue. To the point you just made, though, they are in alliances with two powerful countries who we got some problems with, in Russia and China, who are way bigger than them too, and way more powerful than they are. And looking at the bigger picture, this is where it also gets down to, like, there's just winners and losers sometimes, and it's like Iran's just on the short end of the stick right now. It's like, do you want to go in and start another war in the Middle East? We haven't been too good at those. And, take someone out of power and once again try to spread democracy and realize you're going to fail at that, and what takes over somehow is worse. Because if you would have told me that, like, it would get much worse than Saddam Hussein, in 2002, not that I was thinking about this, I was very little, but let's assume I wasn't and I was me now, I would have laughed at you, said, I can't get worse than that. It got worse.
It got worse.
But
now it's better. I am not. I don't
need an explanation here.
It's I'm just citing where Iraq is right now.
Okay.
Which is far better than where it was in 2001. As
really?
far as yes.
Today.
Yes. There's more freedom. There is a government that is allowing certain civil liberties to the degree that a government that is being torn apart by still various tribal and religious factions can afford. Iraq today is better off than Iraq was in 2000 and 2001. That said, I am not defending the idea that we should have gone in. I don't think we did the right thing to go in, in the way that we did. But I also think that Iraq is better off. The more important issue to raise is this, to think about. Military interventions are bad, right? We haven't been good at them, right? We didn't do well in Afghanistan. Oh my God, those images of us leaving Afghanistan, that summer after President Biden came to office.
Terrible. It was terrible.
And everything that happened in Iraq during the period that we were there, they were devastating to those populations and to our troops, to our lives as Americans, economically and in many other ways. But does that mean that democracy can survive if democracy as a universal idea isn't globally embraced? Do you know what I'm saying?
Can you explain that a little more before I answer?
Sure. I have been. So this is what keeps me up at night.
Okay.
And I'm not pretending to have the answer. But as I'm watching what's happening in the United States, democracy is certainly on the retreat in our country, here in the US. That in all the years that I've been in this country, this is the least free and the least democratic I've ever seen the United States to be. And the threat of it is growing, right? We don't want to get into that conversation. But isn't that, in a way, a result of the global democracy being under assault? And can democracy live and thrive in just one place when in every other place it's waning and it's under assault? I'm here to argue that it cannot. That it's not different from, for lack of another parallel, you can't have COVID in one country and then say the rest of the world can be healthy.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.